So the Supreme Court just handed down a surprise decision that has completely detonated Donald Trump's legal strategy and triggered an immediate meltdown across his social media accounts. And this is not exaggeration. This is one of the most significant legal defeats Trump has suffered since leaving office, because this ruling did not just reject one argument or delay one case. It pulled the foundation out from under the entire strategy Trump has been relying on to avoid accountability. The decision dropped without warning during a routine decision release, catching Trump's legal team totally flat-footed because they were expecting either a narrow ruling later in the term or at least more time to prepare a response. And instead, within minutes, Trump was erupting online, attacking the court, attacking justices he personally appointed, claiming political persecution, and insisting the country was being destroyed, which tells you everything about how badly this landed. Trump has spent months telling supporters that the Supreme Court would save him, that it would step in at the last moment, shut everything down, and prove that the prosecutions against him were unconstitutional witch hunts. And now the very court he reshaped has delivered a ruling that says plainly and clearly that his arguments fail, and that his criminal cases can move forward. This ruling doesn't nibble around the edges. It goes straight to the core of Trump's immunity claims, and rejects them in a way that applies across all of his cases. And the implications are massive. Since leaving office, Trump has faced 91 criminal charges across 4 jurisdictions. And from the beginning, his legal strategy has not been about winning trials. It has been about preventing trials from happening at all, or at least delaying them long enough to get through the election. Every motion, every appeal, every constitutional claim has been aimed at running out the clock, because Trump believes that if he can win the presidency again, he can make the federal cases disappear and undermine the state cases politically. The centerpiece of that strategy has always been presidential immunity, the claim that former presidents cannot be prosecuted for actions taken while in office, no matter how illegal those actions were, because allowing prosecution would supposedly cripple the presidency. Trump's lawyers argued that everything he did surrounding the 2020 election, including efforts to overturn the results, fell within his official duties, and therefore he could not be criminally charged. Most constitutional scholars rejected this theory immediately because the Constitution does not grant presidents immunity from criminal prosecution, and the founders explicitly rejected the idea of kings being above the law. But Trump pressed the argument anyway, appealing loss after loss, convinced that the Supreme Court would eventually step in and rescue him. He believed the conservative supermajority, including 3 justices he personally appointed, would create special protections for him that no other American has ever enjoyed. That confidence is now shattered. The Supreme Court's decision makes clear that former presidents are not immune from criminal prosecution, and that illegal conduct does not magically become lawful simply because it occurred while someone held office. The court distinguished between legitimate official acts and personal criminal conduct, and ruled that Trump's efforts to overturn the election fall squarely into the latter category. This is devastating, because it strips Trump of the argument he has been using not just in the January 6th case, but in every other prosecution as well. If attempting to overturn an election is not protected, then neither is retaining classified documents, falsifying business records, or engaging in election interference at the state level. What makes this ruling even more damaging for Trump is the vote breakdown. This was not a narrow partisan decision. It was not a case where only liberal justices ruled against him. 2 of the 3 justices Trump appointed joined the majority rejecting his immunity claims, making it impossible for him to credibly argue that this was a politically motivated hit job. His own appointees looked at his arguments and said no. That is a humiliation Trump did not anticipate and clearly cannot accept. Within minutes of the decision being released, Trump began posting furious reactions, calling the ruling a disgrace, accusing the justices of weakness, and claiming the country was being destroyed, which is extraordinary coming from someone who appointed a third of the court. This wasn't a measured disagreement. It was an emotional outburst rooted in betrayal, because in Trump's worldview, institutions exist to protect him, and when they don't, they are illegitimate. This pattern is not new. Trump has attacked judges his entire political career, praising them when they rule in his favor, and viciously attacking them when they do not. We've seen this with trial judges, appellate judges, and now the Supreme Court itself. What makes this moment different is the scale. Attacking the legitimacy of the nation's highest court simply because it refused to place him above the law is a direct threat to the rule of law itself. Courts rely on public acceptance of their authority, and when political leaders encourage people to view judicial decisions as corrupt whenever they lose, the entire system begins to crack. The Supreme Court anticipated this danger, and the opinion reads like a deliberate effort to reinforce institutional legitimacy. The ruling is careful, methodical, and grounded in constitutional text, history, and precedent. It dismantles Trump's arguments one by one, explaining why impeachment does not replace criminal prosecution, why fears of political retaliation are addressed through juries and due process, and why allowing presidents to commit crimes with impunity would destroy democratic governance. The opinion emphasizes that no one, not even a president, is above the law, and that accountability is essential to maintaining public trust. The fact that this opinion was authored by the Chief Justice underscores how seriously the court viewed the stakes. It was written not just to resolve Trump's case, but to send a message about constitutional order. One of Trump's own appointees even wrote separately to emphasize that judges owe loyalty to the law, not to the politicians who appoint them, which directly undercuts Trump's expectation of personal allegiance. Trump, however, is incapable of processing this as a legal defeat. In his mind, any outcome that does not protect him is corruption, and any institution that does not serve him deserves to be attacked. That leaves him in an impossible bind. With immunity off the table, Trump now faces multiple criminal trials that will move forward rapidly. Judges who were waiting on Supreme Court guidance can now set dates. Evidence will be presented. Witnesses will testify. Juries will deliberate. This will all happen during an election year, while Trump is trying to convince voters that he is the victim of persecution rather than someone accused of serious crimes. Trials transform his narrative problem because once evidence is shown in court, Trump loses the ability to simply invent alternate realities. The political consequences could be enormous. While Trump's base may remain loyal no matter what, there is a large segment of voters who say a felony conviction would be disqualifying. If Trump is convicted before the election, he would become the first convicted felon to run for president, and his campaign would be consumed by court proceedings rather than policy. Even if he is not convicted before November, the spectacle of ongoing trials will dominate coverage and shape voter perceptions. Democrats will argue, with Supreme Court validation, that Trump is not above the law and that his own appointees agree. That message is powerful, especially with voters who value stability and institutional integrity. At the same time, Trump's reaction suggests he will double down rather than retreat. Instead of accepting the court's ruling, he is attacking its legitimacy, encouraging supporters to believe that even the Supreme Court cannot be trusted. That is deeply dangerous. If Trump loses at trial and continues telling supporters the verdicts are illegitimate, the risk of a constitutional crisis becomes real. This is why legal scholars are alarmed. They are watching a former president and current candidate systematically undermine confidence in the judiciary as part of a strategy to avoid accountability. The Supreme Court's decision represents the legal system drawing a line and saying political power does not grant immunity from criminal law. Whether that line holds will depend not just on courts, but on voters and institutions in the months ahead. We are entering an unprecedented moment where legal accountability and democratic choice are colliding in real time. Trump will be campaigning while prosecutors present evidence of his conduct. He will be claiming persecution while courts apply neutral legal standards. And the outcome will determine not just Trump's fate, but whether the principle that no one is above the law still has meaning in America. The Supreme Court has spoken clearly. Trump's primary legal defense has collapsed. His strategy of delay through immunity has failed. Trials are coming. Accountability is now unavoidable, unless political power overwhelms the legal system itself. What happens next will define the future of American democracy, because it will answer a fundamental question. Are laws stronger than loyalty to one man? Or can power still place someone beyond reach as long as enough people believe the lie? Part 2 begins where the consequences really start to sink in, because now that the Supreme Court has shut the door on presidential immunity, Donald Trump is facing a legal reality he has spent years trying to escape, and there is no procedural maneuver left that can fully shield him. What this decision does, more than anything else, is strip away Trump's ability to control time, and time has always been his most powerful weapon. Delay has been the oxygen keeping his legal strategy alive. Every appeal, every constitutional claim, every motion to pause proceedings was designed to keep trials from happening, because Trump understands something very clearly. Once juries hear evidence, his narrative collapses. The Supreme Court just removed the single biggest source of delay in all of his federal cases, and that changes the entire timeline in a way that Trump cannot spin away. Trial courts are no longer waiting. Judges no longer have excuses to pause proceedings. Prosecutors no longer have to fight uphill battles over immunity claims that were never grounded in law to begin with. The system is now moving forward, and it is moving forward fast. This is why Trump's reaction was so panicked and so public. He knows exactly what this means. He knows that once the first trial begins, the story changes from abstract accusations to sworn testimony, exhibits, documents, and cross-examination. He knows that the moment jurors start deliberating, his ability to frame himself as a victim starts slipping through his fingers, and that is why he is attacking institutions instead of addressing evidence. This is not strength, this is fear. Trump's entire political persona depends on dominance and control, and this decision represents the loss of both. He no longer controls the pace. He no longer controls the form. He no longer controls the outcome through procedural gamesmanship. Instead, he is being forced into the same position as every other criminal defendant in America, where facts matter, evidence matters, and juries decide. That is precisely the situation Trump has been trying to avoid since the moment he left office. The Supreme Court decision also exposes a deeper truth about Trump's relationship with power and accountability. Trump does not believe rules apply to him. He never has. Throughout his business career, his political career, and his presidency, he has operated on the assumption that power itself is justification, that winning excuses behavior, and that consequences are for other people. When courts enforce the law against him, he does not see that as justice. He sees it as betrayal. That is why he reacts the way he does. That is why every loss is framed as corruption. That is why every institution that refuses to bend to his will becomes the enemy. This decision did not just defeat Trump legally, it challenged his entire worldview. And when Trump's worldview is challenged, he lashes out. The danger here is not just about Trump personally,